Good evening, everyone. Hope you guys have had a good Sunday. So, to get right into it, a lot of what we call crawlers, what we think are crawlers, are actually probably something more akin to a Wendigo. And there are a couple of modern and older concepts of Wendigo. Modern concept is they are a spiritual creature that has become undead because of wasted away life, of greed, or because they've engaged in cannibalism in life, which caused them to become a Wendigo, or they are a drowning victim, which causes them again to become a type of Wendigo, meaning a person. So the older form is actually a little different. The older form of lore thinks that some of these creatures actually are passing a disease around, a wasting disease of some sort. So let's start with some of the types of Wendigos, and then I'll get into some descriptions of some of this stuff. The face eater, for instance, is potentially a Wendigo type, or at least one of these undead creatures. But this one, because of the mouth structure, might just be a peculiar cryptid that happens to be very scrawny. Due to the fact that they don't eat a lot, they live in caves. These drawings you've seen before, the old Wendigo drawing, and Deer Woman, another type of Wendigo. But Deer Women can be considered a witch doctor of sorts as well. They always hide their feet, but they're also Wendigo hunters. So men that were trained in some tribes to actually hunt and destroy these kinds of entities. Here in the Northwest, different varieties of these things. You've got the Baycock, which is a human being that's been infected by a Wendigo spirit, usually because they're a warrior that's been taken out while they're hunting, or a hunter that's been taken out while they're hunting. Sometimes they're taken out by one of these cryptids because they're assumed to be a coward. And then you've got a buckwis. Buckwis is a completely different creature. Buckwis is a small creature. Buckwis are only a few feet tall. And they are entities that are supposedly children that have drowned and been taken over by, yet again, a Wendigo spirit. So let me back up before I get into talking about the one I ran into. Let's go through some of the concepts of pale crawler. I'll put my glasses on so I can read my notes. So the Baycock, or what's the other name? Poyak? I think it's the other name. Pagyak. Comes from Algonquin and Ojibwe lore. The pale crawler with 3 fingers and claws. Gaunt, humanish looking. Some lore says that Baycock have sharp teeth like needle shark teeth. Or maybe primate like. Some are able to fly, because there are some of these things that are supposedly winged. I'm still looking for those types of lore, because my grandmother only mentioned them. She didn't get into a lot of description of them. Some of this lore was around the time she passed, so some of it's kind of never been completed for me. That's why I have to do some research. Some of them use blow darts that are Baycock. They use clubs, bows, and arrows, so they retain the ability to use tools, not necessarily the ability to make more. Also, when the Baycock hunts you down, they eat your liver typically. Well, that's also a tradition in some northern tribes. You eat the liver of the animal of your first kill. But again, that also goes along with cannibalistic concepts that are associated with these things becoming crawlers or Wendigo. And the reason why I say they're more Wendigo-like is because that's what my grandmother claimed. My grandmother also claimed that if you looked into all of the Walking Dead lore of Native American cultures, you'll find a lot of similarities with the Wendigo spirit, which is supposed to be a type of possession. Oh, and it's said here in the Northwest, or here in the United States by the Ojibwe, which is actually back east, that they'll use their claws to remove your liver. Some lore said it was a stone knife. And some, like I said, some are supposedly winged and they resemble gargoyles, but they don't have any tails. There's supposedly one in this area. I've gotten a couple of reports by people saying that there's one in this area. I have not investigated the location. I know where it's at. I'm gonna take somebody else with me though if I go into that area. So I've got extra help with spiritual protection, because these things can be very deadly and dangerous. Okay, they're believed to be the unrested spirit of a person who died unjustly or before their time, according to Ojibwe lore. In the Ojibwe lore, it said that they hunt brave warriors. My grandmother claimed that they hunted cowardice, or people who screamed. Other Great Lakes area tribes also say that. And in the Ojibwe lore, Bigfoot is called Sabe, forest brothers like they are in my Hunkpapa lore. There are other versions of, like The Walking Dead. No wings. They always hunt at night. Some use blow darts. Some have a human-like hand and feet structure with fingernails and toenails, but they're always black in color. A lot of primates actually have black fingernails, especially the smaller primates. That's something to consider. They are also claimed to live in caves, and some of these things can mimic enough to call for help or to call your name. A lot of these creatures use clicking sounds to echolocate. So, the Wendigo spirit possession overall comes from greed, famine, and or cannibalism. Some of the forms are Darewoman, the Face Eater, the Wendigo, the Baycock, the Yoo-Hoo, the Bugwuss, etc. Or Buckwuss. My grandmother called them Bugwuss. Difference probably in lore. Now, let's get back to some of this other stuff. So the Baycock is from the Ojibwe lore. They have red eye shine and supposedly 3 fingers. Some of them come with claws, some of them come with wings. The Buckwuss, which is smaller and hairy, is actually a drowned Bigfoot child that has taken a Wendigo form. And there is also supposedly a Baycock up in the Windberry area here in Oregon. There's native lore about it. Tribally, he guards the graveyard up there, a native graveyard somewhere. So these will always be a human in tattered clothing, and they will retain the ability to use certain weapons. The Baycock often carries a club or bow and arrow. And when you get into the other one, which is the Buckwuss, they are a small, diminutive creature, 3 to 4 foot in height. Sometimes they're reported as, human-sized. Always hairy. They have rotting flesh and hair mixed together. They usually have sticks and leaves and feathers in their body hair. They'll offer you ghost food. If you sit and eat ghost food with them, you become a Buckwuss, supposedly. But my grandmother's lore said a little bit different about them. Let me look here if there's any more information. Okay, yeah, no more particular information. So some of these things can still be found in lore. You just have to dig. You have to read the descriptions of the different types of Walking Dead creatures. Some are going to be more spiritually oriented. It's going to be a case of possession. Some of the lore you've got to look at twice because it's either talking about something associated with Bigfoot. They're never large, though they're small when you're talking about the buckwus. They're not 8 foot tall. They're a little tiny. And in fact, Jen, when she was telling me about her little sister drowning, because she'd been pulled under the water by a giant otter, it was believed that her little sister's spirit could become a buckwus because it had drowned. So Jen's family hired a mask maker to make a mask. They did a big ceremony, and Jen swam underwater where her sister had been pulled under to place the mask underwater to chase away the spirit that would that had supposedly drowned her sister. It was to prevent her sister from coming back as a buckwus instead of reincarnating. I know that sounds very peculiar, but lore is associative, meaning that each culture has their own concept. And it doesn't matter if it's Bigfoot culture or tribal culture, there are very particular circumstances within which things occur. So you have to take that social structure into account in order to understand some of this stuff. So some of it you've got to kind of get into more research than you want to just to be able to understand the concepts. But that's a good thing because education helps. I haven't seen any of these things except for the crawler that tried to get into my tent. And I'm going to go through those images because I drew several of them. And I think now that I've sat here and drawn this thing out and remembered what I didn't want to remember it trying to get into my tent, I think it actually only had 3 fingers. I could be wrong, but that's all I saw. It was also dark, and there was also no nothing there to record it. So let's go through those images really quick. So it smelled like swamp water, brackish water. It smelled moldy, like rotten meat, musty. It smelled a bit like sewage, defecation without cleaning. Some body BO, so it has sweat glands. And when it was breathing at my tent, it had rotten breath. It made the air taste like rotten breath. I know, because I was breathing just on the other side of the tent flap from this thing. So my encounter with one of these crawler things, I've only had one encounter that was a direct encounter like that, and that happened in 2020. And it was a creature that had tried to get into my tent in the middle of the night. It crawled up, it sounded kind of like a raccoon, but maybe a little bigger, baby bear, maybe, in sound when it was coming up. But I didn't pay attention to it because it was such a commonish kind of sound. And I'd already brought my dog in because she'd already been whimpering and freaking out earlier that night, did not want to stay in her outdoor kennel. So I brought her into the tent. I woke up to seeing fingers through the zipper of my tent right in the corner where it was holding the zipper tab with its fingers and holding the pull tab, so it was trying to keep the zipper quiet while it was unzipping my tent. So that tells me this creature had unzipped a tent before and knew how to keep a zipper quiet. that in itself kind of freaked me out. The fact that it had black fingernails that were very ragged looking, that also freaked me out. So, let me go to a little more description. So when I noticed that it was unzipping my tent, my dog hunkered down between my legs. She was already there sleeping, but she got really low to the ground. She did a throat growl where I could feel her body vibrate, but I could barely hear her growl. And it, her reaction was a combination of fear and I'm going to jump at it. Because I could tell that she was digging in, and she was probably going to run right over the top of me, and I didn't want her to engage this thing at all. So, overall, it messing with the tent and then being outside the tent was almost a minute. It was there huffing at my door for somewhere between 30 and 40 seconds after I threatened it. Because I threatened it. I had a nice-sized Bowie knife on me, and I told it as it was unzipping my door, "Don't do that. I will cut you into 1-inch cubes, and you'll be done." And that's when it stopped unzipping my tent, and it just sat there, huffing, breathing, sniffing, and scaring the crud out of me. And my dog. But that, I could smell its scent. I could tell that it didn't have rotten flesh. It had a full covering of flesh. Yes, it was very gray. Yes, it was very pale. And yes, it was incredibly emaciated. But it didn't have any rotten flesh on it. Um, to turn and to crawl away. And it got to maybe 10 feet initially. And that's when I poked my head up. I just turned over. I grabbed my knife out of the sheath, kept it in my hand. I turned over, got on my knees. And my dog, she hunkered right between my legs. So I know she was still going to go straight out the door if that door was open. Because she was inside my sleeping bag with me. And I pushed my head up through the sunroof because there's just screening. I hadn't put my rain fly on. When I pushed up so I could see over the top of my little arched doorway, it initially turned around and looked back at me, and that's what I saw when it initially looked back at me. It didn't open its mouth that time. It just looked at me. And I could see, like, as it turned its head, I could see that it had really deep set, really dark eyes, probably black, but there was eye shine to them. I could see a bit of a silver sheen, like dogs or primates do when their head turns at night. You'll see that sheen, and then you see the color of what their eye shine is. Well, this thing's eye shine was white, and as it turned a little bit more towards me and blinked, it became incredibly pale yellow. Now, I've seen this thing at night a couple more times, because I have gone in to try to figure out where it goes. And believe it or not, there's a spot that this thing sits in the brush line near a roadway. And it will be on either side of the roadway in the middle of the night. But it's never, it's not like a deer. You can tell when a deer is crossing a road. They'll look up at you, they'll turn. No, this thing is focused on the road. And it's sitting far enough back in the brush line, you can't really see it, even in your car's headlights. You'd have to turn towards it, or you'd have to put a bullseye light on it to catch it, because it knows the limit of the light on both sides of that road. So, in my mind, this thing is not a spiritual entity. It is a creature of some type. Just because it has silver eye sheen and then the eye shine, that tells me it's something physical, not spiritual. And the behavior consistently hunting in a particular area. And there have been multiple sightings of this thing over the years in that particular region of a particular lake here. So the second time, and I watched it, it made 3 or 4 more steps, crawling steps, made it to about 15 feet, and it turned its head again, the same direction over its left shoulder, to look at me, and that's when I could see its very peculiar head shape, because it had a more of a side profile, and it opened its mouth. It's also when I noticed that it had no nose, and it had canines. So my mind at that point was trying to figure out why I was looking at an archaic man crawling away from me. Because the head shape, to me, when I saw it, and it did have 2 muscular bumps here in the back, to me this looks like an Australopithecus skull in a living creature. The shape of it is so Australopithecus, my brain was stuck with, what am I seeing? Am I seeing a caveman of some sort crawling away from me? A noseless monkey? What am I seeing? Why am I seeing this body structure together? It didn't make any sense to me. So we do have noseless monkeys, and noseless monkeys have no cartilage in the end of their nose, so their nose looks like a open skeletal nose. You can look them up. Also the fact that crawlers are always described as having no lips. This thing didn't look like it had lips until it opened its mouth. And then I could see what looked kind of like the presentment of the edges of the mouth being a little thicker. Not per se lips, but more like how a primate's mouth does. So I think this is actually potentially a living creature of some sort and not a spiritual entity. The other bizarre thing is my native grandmother, when she talked about crawlers, she talked about them as if they were cave-dwelling humanoids from really ancient times that never left caves. They habitually practiced cannibalism, and they would cannibalize anything that they caught. And that their bite was like a Komodo dragon's bite. If they bit you, your flesh would rot. You would get a horrible infection, like gangrene. There are other animals that can do that too. Mink, Komodo dragons, animals that eat a lot of meat. When they bite you, they have an infectious bite. So this thing might actually be an archaic historic creature that still lives in caves, has never come out of caves, and still practices cannibalism. And if you go back far enough in history, you will find that every archaic humanoid at one time or another has practiced cannibalism. So that, to me, is more potential. Let me see if there's any other notes here. No, I think I got them all. So anyway, personally, I think they're probably, some of them are probably spiritual, but some of these things might actually be living creatures of some type that are potentially infected with some sort of rotting disease. Because there's a lot of stories. Excuse me. There are a lot of stories about decaying animals and decaying creatures. There are also a lot of weird stories about ancient forests having unusual things in them that would harm you. Like some of the lore suggests that the horned wendigo was exposed to something that animated them. After death. I've been working in buildings that have a lot of black mold in them. My lungs are a little hashed this week. Sorry, guys. So, if there were things like zombifying molds, which affect insects today, there may have been something in the ancient past that did the same thing to human beings or animals. Could be diseases that we're unaware of that lay in ancient grounds, or that no longer exist because they've become dormant. Don't know, but the thing that I ran into left footprints, because when I got up in the morning, I took a look across the grass when it was still dew on the grass, and you could very clearly see where it had trucked off across the lawn at the campground. And the day before, when I'd walked my dog up through the trail system there, I'd heard clicking and something on the ground rustling around following us. And it followed us for a good 40 or 45, maybe 50 feet. So I didn't delay a whole lot. And my doggo wasn't too happy about being up there. She kept growling at the woods. So I figured there was a predator. Thought it might have been a cougar or something. Except I couldn't figure out the clicking. The back of my head's like, that's a crawler. But I'd never run across one. I knew there was lore associated with crawlers in that area. But now that I've seen one, I am pretty sure it is a creature and not just a spiritual entity. So if you got any questions, we'll take a section of time here to answer some questions. Let me go back through and do some reading here. Catch up, see if anybody's got questions. And thank you everybody for being here today. Really appreciate you. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Autumn. Yeah, great topic, Wendigo. Because there is a lot of lore about Wendigos, and each tribe has a variation. Most tribes. Not every tribe. Most tribes have some sort of variation of this lore, and it's usually specific to their area. Specific to their area. So it's good to look up the lore for each different tribe and try to figure out the region and exactly what kind of critter might be in those regions historically. That will tell you a lot about what you're going to find today if you're looking for cryptids and things that you should probably be watching out for. Because if these things do have a rotten bite, like you can't get bitten by a mink without it infecting. Dog bites usually infect. People bites, if a person bites another person, we actually have a really dirty mouth and we actually cause a carrion bite. Primates, same way. If they are a primate that eats meat, Komodo dragons, a bunch of different things have a very carrion-based bite. So that's something to consider. Okay. Hey, Hollis. Thank you. So glad you're here, Autumn. Really, really appreciate it. Colors are smart, learning, and mimicking fast-moving cryptids. Yeah, that's the other thing. Some people think they are slow. They can appear to be slow, but there's lots of lore out there that says they are not slow. And there's several different types of them. Some of them have claws, some of them don't have claws. Some of them are smaller and hairy and actually don't belong to our lore per se, but they do Those little smaller, hairier ones are included in our lore probably because of our interactions with Sabe Bigfoot. And I think some of our lores might be shared lores. Because some of the lore that my grandmother claimed to know, she said actually came from the Sabi people originally. And we adopted the lore because it was part of our family lore when we married into these people's family groups and tribes. It was sharing lore and keeping trade alive between tribes. Yeah, don't get bit. Because if it is some sort of a diseased creature that can transmit a disease to you through bite, rabies is transferred that way, and there is no cure for rabies. Whatever this creature might carry may not be curable either. And I wouldn't want to get bitten and find out I can't live through it. No thanks. Uh, and I would fight myself to the death to get away from one of these things. No. There was a fellow recently, like in the last couple of years, who had one of these things that had claws get into the bed of his truck. I've seen that video. I've listened to that video. And that matches a lot of the Greater Lakes region description of these things. So, they can be anywhere. My grandmother claimed that they lived in caves, in little deep caves that were narrow, is typically where she said they lived, claimed that they lived. These things are one of the reasons why there was always the warning of don't sleep in a cave that you can't find the back of, even if it's got a narrow slit in it. Because whatever the size of these critters is, if their head can fit through the hole, their whole body can fit through the hole. So it's always part of native lore, don't sleep in a cave you can't find the back of, because crawlers might live in it. And, Australopithecus and some of these other more ancient Florensis, etc., primate species that are related to us actually buried their dead in caves, supposedly. Maybe they weren't burying them, maybe they were just putting them in the deepest part of the cave to keep them refrigerated enough to eat them. We don't know. Uh, could be burial, could have been something else. Maybe they're just cave dwellers. Maybe they're diets. The other is the size of them. They're human size or smaller typically, except for the Wendigo, who grows larger as it eats more. It's the only one that does that. That one's probably more of a spiritual kind of thing. Ah, they literally have venom. That would be interesting. Because that's what my grandmother said about the face eaters. She said that this thing, with the mouth that opened up too far, actually had venomous glands back up inside its jaw. So, if these two things are related, it would make sense that they have a similar venom issue. I hope that's not the case, but I wouldn't put it past nature, because nature has learned how to make things survive. Hey friends. Hey Lilo. Hey Auntie. Good to see you guys all here. Yeah, eucalyptus. I need to do that, clear up that or camphor. My God. Too much mold. Yeah, mullein is another good one. Okay, the clicking sound always creeps me out. Thankfully, I've never seen one in person. Yeah, don't. They're not fun. This thing scared me pretty good. But I wasn't going to run away from it. No option to run away from it. I was stuck in a little tiny mountaineering tent, staked to the ground. Not a good place to be. When you've only got, a tissue paper piece of fabric between you and something like this. It's not a very comforting feeling. So I don't camp in tents anymore because of this kind of experience. That once was enough for me. Uh, I'll just go camp in the deep woods instead of a campground, and I will stay inside my vehicle because no, absolutely not. I don't know LHV. I don't know if the military uses them, but I wouldn't put it past them. The military will grab anything they can and utilize anything they can or experiment on them, so who knows? I know that the lore of them, though, has been around longer than the United States, so like a lot of things that have been captured, they've been here longer, just being utilized in a different way. Okay, little, what's the difference between the crawler and the rake? Uh, does ultraviolet light burn their skin? I have heard that also a rake's poisonous. Huh, with its touch. Well, if it's poisonous with its touch, then it's eating something poisonous that allows that to occur. In India, it was what was called the poison maidens, or poison maids. For a while, there was an empire within India that would poison children at birth. They would find little girls and poison them to a point where by the time they became a teenager, you couldn't touch them, you couldn't interact with them, you couldn't even touch their clothing or touch an item that they had touched. And it was because they had been fed so much poison that they themselves became poisonous, and everything that they interacted with that was living died. If you've got something like that coming around, it is likely that they're eating something that's incredibly poisonous that they are immune to, but that you're not immune to because you've not been exposed repeatedly to the poison. I don't know as far as the difference between a rake and a crawler. To me, I would assume that they're all part of the Wendigo type things that may be classed as a spiritual entity when they're really not a spiritual entity. They're just another type of cryptid that we haven't cataloged yet. And I'd actually probably look more to the texts from India and the different creatures from the battle zones of uh, different cryptids against each other. Hanuman fighting demonic animals, other leaders in ancient times, you know, fighting cryptids. Because there's actually a lot of descriptions in those books about, or in those texts, about the properties of some of these cryptid things. How they acted, what they looked like, if they were poisonous, if they traveled in a cloud of light, or if they traveled in a cloud of uh, blackness, shadow, shade, that sort of thing. So my recommendation would be to look at as many different indigenous cultures and indigenous stories and ancient stories as possible, because the older the story is, the more likely the information is true and correct, instead of muddled by modern opinion. And you can have a better chance to kind of unravel some of this through looking at more ancient documents and descriptions. I mean, like I said, as you look up, wasted away creatures and different tribal understandings, they're all described a little differently. They all have slightly different characteristics. They're all localized. They all have particular places that they go or things that they do. Again, that indicates they are some sort of a creature, not necessarily a spiritual entity. They may have become more idealistically spiritualized in modern concept, especially when trying to, like, indigenous people trying to explain some of these things to a different culture, like Europeans that don't believe in this sort of thing. It would be very difficult to linguistically explain what some of these things were to strangers that had never seen them. So keep that in mind too. The people recording them, recording the information about them, and writing it down likely never saw any of these creatures. They were relying on descriptions and the linguistic barriers between the people they were speaking with and European language. And I think that's why some of the reasons why a lot of our lore got kind of clumped together. It was easier to put all these things under one title. You know, Sasquatch, they're all the same. Wendigo, they're all the same, except they're probably not. And they're probably, referring to multiple different creatures. The lore is probably referring to multiple different creatures. Okay, I'm just going down through. I guess we're over now. Spider bite. Oh, yikes. Spider bites suck, man. I wonder that actually, LHV, whether or not these things can communicate with bats. And the reason why I wonder that is because the last time I took my doggo for a potty walk was around dusk, and I was back in the same area where the clicking had been. And a lot of bats back there that afternoon, evening, were flying really too close to the ground. Bats usually fly, 10, 15 feet up or above. These things were skimming the top of the brush line where this thing was clicking. So it makes me wonder if they can communicate with bats. Maybe they have the same clicking sequences, or maybe they have a similar infrasound, ultrasound with their clicking. I don't know. But I did find it peculiar that the bats were far closer to the ground that evening than I normally see them. Made me curious. Autumn cave dwelling cryptids might adapt like spiders and bats. Scorpions and snakes become venomous. That's a good possibility too. Especially if you're in a really enclosed environment. If something does come down into your cave, you have to defend yourself immediately. You have no way out. If the predator is in front of you, you have to go around it. So it would make sense that they'd have a venomous bite. You're right. That's a very good observation. Yeah, I don't currently have Spider Bite. I don't currently have a usable email except my personal email. I know. It's a horrible thing to do to children. But powerful people in India, if they wanted to have a spy that couldn't be killed, or to kill a leader that they didn't want to make agreements with, you'd give them one of these people as a bride or as a performer and not tell them that they're deadly poisonous. Hey, Auntie Erin, but I don't know. I asked my question in comments on videos, but I like to send my pictures. Okay. Now I'll have to make a new email. And I'll have to post it up again. I wish YouTube started doing pics in chat. Yeah, I wish they would. That would be really nice if we could share links and pictures and stuff in the chat. Out here, and I love that too. Uh, sure, Cheryl. I live in Central Oregon. What kind of cryptids do we have here, if you know? Thank you. There's sun-faced people over there. There are Yeren. Yeren are large, red, Bigfoot. Sun-faced people are black-haired. There are two types of them that I was able... During my turnout, I did my turnout in Central Oregon, meaning my adult right to passage. And I know that there are sun-faced people over there, two sizes of them. One scraping 15 feet in height. They live in really remote areas of Central Oregon. And then there are also the smaller, human-sized sun-faced people. Sun-faced people look more or less like a Bigfoot, except instead of having gray skin under the black hair, they have a more modern skin tone. Some of them look a little sunburnt, but they have incredibly human faces. The ones that are about our size have a really weak jaw, like a primate jaw. The bigger ones have a real modern-looking facial structure for the most part. And in fact, there's a new video out showing a giant, not a sun-faced person, but a giant Bigfoot with an incredibly human-looking face. I have a picture of one from here like that, which is one of the individuals I want to try to get better pictures of, because he's got to have about a 23-inch long foot track that's about 18 inches across. He likes to move around during the winter when the rest of the group is out of the area. He's up where that mixed group is. Occasionally I will see him in the summer, and he'll be down with the rest of the group, but he's one of two giants up there, what we call giants, and I want to try to get better footage of those guys. But I'm glad somebody else got some footage on a trail cam, because you can tell they look very human in the face, frighteningly human in the face. It's another reason why I think they're just archaic humanoids that we haven't categorized, that we don't have on the books yet. Or maybe we don't realize that we've got traces of them on the books and we just haven't been able to plug in the DNA yet to figure out what part of our, history they belong to. There's an interesting display at the Burke Museum in Washington. They have a mocked up facial structure of a Bigfoot next to a reproduction of a robustus skull. They look very similar. Additionally, when you look at the Denisovans, their skulls are actually larger than ours. So Denisovans were not small. They averaged about 7 feet in height if you look at the skull size. So there might be more varieties of ancient people still living and still in our environment than we realize. They may not have died out, and I would rather that they are researched or at least preserved instead of just bowled over and removed from this planet through expansion or anything like that. Because if they are relatives of ours and they do have a genetic connection to us, maybe we could answer a lot of questions about stuff. Because sun-faced people get arthritis and have wry neck. And old lore claims that we got arthritis from them. But then anytime you're highly domesticated, you get arthritis. Animal or not. It's because you become sedentary, you become overfed, and you sit around too much. That's why we get arthritis. Because we're not following our normal pattern. What we were designed for was to live out in the open, to live amongst the trees, to live amongst the animals. We've done that for millions of years. In the last couple of thousand years, we've started, domesticating ourselves to a point where we're getting diseases. The diseases that we wouldn't normally have. Okay, so doesn't look like there are any more questions. One of the other sets of pictures that I put up, or picture that I put up earlier this week in my post section, was a picture of a Wasiju, hole in the sky house. And I've got to go in and get better pictures of this thing. Oh, come on. Focus, you silly camera. Oh, it doesn't like the lighting. Ah, there we go. So some of the Wasijus can be permanent structures where the tree has been bent and sculpted and designed. Those things in some cases. I was at a Wasiju in the forests in California with my mother. It was massive. It had multiple rooms. Part of it was removable, part of it was not. It was just huge. So these things will have multiple layers and multiple rooms in them. And they typically will go vertical, but they also go sideways. Because if there are enough trees together, they'll just link them together with sky bridges. And they'll make another section and another section. So some of them, the trees are sculpted in place, or they're bent so that a platform can be put in. Some sections of them are completely movable, and they're not permanent. They're laced into the tree and then removed and taken to another set of trees. And they almost always have a top entry, not a bottom entry. If you get into the bottom, you have to climb the tree to get into the bottom of it. Otherwise, you go several hundred yards away, find the tree that you go up, and you have to go through this woven tunnel system to drop down into these structures. This is done so that bear and cougar and whatnot, you can stay away from them. And the bigger Bigfoot will sit in the lower structure while the kids play in the safer, movable structures. That is so that if something large, predator-like, comes towards the tree or up the tree, they have a defensible position between themselves and their children to higher trees elsewhere. So it's not just a summer home, because that's typically what you do for summer homes. It's also a defensible position for a family group. So there are probably researchers that have already run across some of these things and didn't know what they're called. They're called a Wasiju, and it's a hole in the sky because you're living in a hole in the sky. Is how my grandmother explained it. So if they're a permanent structure, they'll weave branches into a big bundle. Sometimes they'll pin them in place and graft them back to a tree so that the tree grows to itself, that sort of thing. The one that I saw when I was a kid was grafted. So it had multiple layers that were permanent layers, and they were grafted in place. And they were massive, really large structures. And I got to play in one of these things. I've been in this one once, but I got to play in one of these structures once when I was a kid. And they're a lot of fun, but they're quite intricate. They're far more intricate than you realize. And I know there are some researchers that have probably already found these are out there doing good research. All right. So if you have any questions, I want to cover that little casting there. No, that is not a Bigfoot casting. It is a foot track casting, but I had it cast very recent, and I will go into exactly why here in a minute. If you got any questions, though, about Wasijus, hole-in-the-sky structures, please let me know. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. They're like a Bigfoot treehouse, basically. Okay, and here, would you be willing to be a guest on my friend's show and talk about some of these? Yeah, definitely. If you can, just hit up any one of my comment sections and leave me the channel's like contact email, and I can email them from my private email. I don't have to give my private email out, and it'll save me from having to make a new one immediately. Maybe we can arrange something like that if you're up for it. Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, Annie. Oh wow. So please pray for Annie and her family. Prayer works. Please pray for healing. Please pray for any kind of help. Have the Creator watch over them. Okay. I know it's really hard for a parent to go. I've lost both my parents at this point. Neither one's passing was an easy thing. I'm sorry to hear that. So let's get on to the track. So I went out to the Squatch Fest out here in Oak Ridge. And I actually wanted this casting done because it's a good representation of pancake track. And pancake track, if you aren't aware, is an incredibly thin track. This one's maybe a half inch or less. Even at the ball of the foot, it's very, very narrow. Okay, the reason why this track is so flat is not because it is faked. The reason why this track is so flat is because it was a strike on a hard surface. So if you got a hard packed ground clay, this one was actually on asphalt with a thin skip of mud and clay over the top of maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, you will find that the track that's left behind is going to be very flat because there's no impressionable material. Okay? We're used to looking at Bigfoot tracks and stuff like that as being several inches down into the ground. But if you have a hard layer of hard packed ground, anything, clay, sandstone, etc., and you have a little 1/2 inch of mud or clay over the top of hard packed ground, your impression depth can only go as deep as the soft material on top. So these tracks are not faked. They're not a carved board. The reason why they're flat is because there is no place else for the foot to go. So the track becomes measurably flat in its characteristics. Okay? On all sides. Alright, so the other thing that's really nice about a track like this is you can definitely see the characteristics of impact. Okay? You can line them out. That's something that's going to be very good for actually doing morphological foot research. The other is a track that is this flat actually is very high relief. It gives you a lot of good information. You know, you're looking at a relatively clear, clean track no matter how you cast it, you can't make a mistake in casting it. And in fact, this child wears Zoris a lot of the time. And I only know that because I ended up with Zori foot as a kid. You'll if you wear Zoris a lot, which you really don't do it because this portion of your foot has a nerve that connects to your heart. And if you put a lot of pressure on this section between your front toe, your first toe, and your big toe, you'll actually compress that nerve and cause yourself heart issues. So this child wore Zoris enough that they've created this little, like, impression fold in their foot. I went through this when I was a kid. I ended up with sore foot. Went to the doctor. The doctor told me to stop wearing Zoris, and my track looked very much like this child's track. So I don't always take a track simply because it's a Bigfoot track. Sometimes I take a track because it's useful information. And there's a hair stuck in this particular casting. So keep in mind that not all tracks are going to print the same, but they are going to be useful, especially for research. High relief like this, if we'd poured this with slightly thinner pour material, it would have been a beautiful track. Like you could have resculpted the thing. Additionally, you can tell a lot from a track like this. If the individual, because this kid doesn't wear shoes a lot, the toe isn't bent inward, and its toes aren't squinched a lot, so this kid goes barefoot a lot. Another thing you can tell with tracks like this is whether or not the individual has a straight back. Like if the child had a curvature of the spine, this track's impact would have been off one way or the other and would not have been in a straight line. See how the ball of the foot matches almost exactly the tip of the toe? If they had a curvature of the spine, that toe would be out or in. But that's just, tracking evidence and knowing how to track a human. I was actually taught by my mother how to track humans. So you learn about how the body shifts, what kind of things happen when you carry something. Your imprint will change. You'll dig a little more with the side of your foot where you're carrying a heavy object. If you're holding hands with another person, your tracks will actually pull apart and go back together as you're walking together side by side. So it looks like, your trackway does this. It pulls apart, comes together, pulls apart, comes together. Because you're walking with, holding hands, you're holding on to each other. So it alters the way your feet move in relation to your body because you're tagging yourself to another individual. Same with carrying stuff. If you carry something in front of you, your toes are going to dig in more and your heel is going to strike harder. If you're carrying it on one side, that side of your foot is going to dig in more. If you have an injury, the way your foot lays in the track, it's going to change. So, there are people out there who want to cast tracks. Doesn't matter what type of casting material you use, they're all relatively the same, with one exception. And the rest, my notes to you. Your shrink rate on plasters is something to consider, even if it's minimal. Trying to record information accurately. You're a painstaking researcher. There are a couple of types of things you won't use. So casting is plaster repairs that any kid uses for any project. Your shrink rate is 0.1% to 0.3%. It's very municipal, and plaster, just plain old plaster repairs, depending on the thickness of it, something this thick could dry in an hour. So the next step is to go to a hydrothermic casting material. like hydrocal or ultracal. Those have up to a much larger shrink rate to plaster repairs. It's not 0.3, it's 0.3. So the shrink rate is a little harsher on you. If you go to Fix It All, which is just wall putty, it's actually stabilized to have 0% shrinkage. It states it right on the box. You can still mix it down like plaster Paris, and it has all the properties of drying quickly and hardening fast, like it's more expensive hydrothermic material, but it only costs you like $11 a box. So that is something to consider. Like I just got binked off the net again. Look up feed. Alright. Hopefully I get picture back here. Because I can still you guys can't use the anymore. Well, alright. My gosh. Alright. Let me turn this back around again. Sorry about this. I think I might have to end this a little sooner than I'd wanted. So when you're mixing plaster for casting, some people use a stick or a gloved hand or etc. I always put my powder in my water so I don't end up with globs in it. It's sort of like the method for always putting acid in water. If you're doing any kind of chemical reactionary stuff, acid into water, powder into water. I use a measuring device. It's got your liters on it. And I use a shaker inside of my measuring device. I also like to use a pour container that you don't ever touch the material inside. You can buy these little shakers at a drink store. They work really well in the field. You have a completely isolated system where you don't have to worry about contamination. Use a device like this. They're typically water, leakage proof, and they got a nice flip top on them that seals really nicely for pouring. You have a controlled pour. Easy to use. Easy to carry. You don't have a lot with it. Just make sure you rinse that. Sorry about that, guys. It looks like somebody got a little issued up on that one. Not trying to promote anybody's product, just trying to show a useful device for working in the field if you're trying to cast. So the other thing, all plasters have gypsum in them. When you cast anything in the wild, when you pull your cast out of the ground, make sure you always use a well-fitting glove so that you don't contaminate anything. Loose-fitting gloves have a tendency to tear, and if you're pulling something out of the ground, you can contaminate it by accident if you don't have a good fitting glove. I also use medical grade gloves if I do any castings that are, nitrile gloves, that sort of thing. Same that you use in the medical industry. And I always try to use at least a 7mm thicker glove, less chances of tearing it. And additionally, when you pull a cast out of the ground, don't brush it off in the field, bag it immediately. Leave all the gook and gunk that sticks to that cast on it. The reason why it's sticking, why the material is sticking to your plaster cast is because that's how far the plaster has tainted the soil. So you just put all of that in a bag, take it with you. Either take it back to camp where you can process it out, or take it home. Also, when you're casting in the ground, because there's gypsum in this stuff, make sure you don't leave any little bits. Don't flick anything on the ground from it. Gypsum's asbestos, nothing that animals need to be eating. So make sure you clean all that stuff up and, dispose of it correctly. Additionally, whatever layer that you pull out of the ground with your cast is going to have the most trace DNA in it. That's why I say always use a gloved hand when removing it. You don't necessarily have to use it to pour, but you definitely have to have gloved hands to pull one out if you're planning on doing any trace DNA. That's the other reason why you just bag the whole thing, because then you don't lose anything. That's how I've always done it. Those are the techniques that have worked for me. And yes, I do have some bagged soils from different castings that are all labeled, but I don't have the money or the time to send them in currently. And, the longer that goes, the less trace DNA will be left. You can actually only hang on to trace DNA for about 3.5 years before it becomes a real pain to try to get it back out. They'd have to use a lot more stabilizers, etc., and filtering chemicals or setting process in order to get that DNA back out. And if you're doing casting and things like bedrock, there isn't going to be any DNA in that kind of thing anyway. And the reason why I say that is because there are several castings I want to make that belong to uh, Archaic, Bigfoot, and the original track is sitting in bedrock. And I'm not going to be able to plaster cast them. I'd have to use a barrier to do that, and I'd have to use a wall. So I'm probably not going to cast them that way. But I will use plasticine air dry clay that doesn't have a shrink rate on it. And still use a barrier. Because anything that is a track in the United States that's actually in bedrock is protected. So you can't pour anything into them anyway, just like you can't cut them out of the ground. It's illegal to do so. However, you can use a barrier and you can use a non-polluting clay type, including probably flour clay types or baking soda clay types. And those are air dry clay types that you can use for that sort of thing. But unless you're interested in casting tracks that are in bedrock, you aren't ever going to really have a need for that sort of thing or a desire to do that. I'm only doing that because I'm trying to preserve representations of tracks that are associated with my grandmother's lore and Uncle Ong's lore. So, that being said, um, it's only for recording purposes for my own lore, for my family's own understanding of a particular area. It's not for research. It was just to document certain things. So hopefully this has been informational. Hopefully it's been helpful. And you've gotten a few ideas as to what some of these crawler-like creatures could potentially be. Or what they may not be. And until we've gotten some more information about them or been able to study them in some way, we're not really getting to know a lot about them until there's a body of evidence of some sort or enough sightings. Oh, good. Yeah, be really careful out there, guys, because there are lots of things that we don't have records of. I always say go to the lore. If you're in a particular area, search out as much of the native lore in your particular area, the tribes that lived there, the kinds of things that they interacted with. That will give you the best idea of what you're going to run across in any particular area. And don't defer to just one tribe. Look at as many local tribes as possible. At least anything surviving. because a lot of our lore was also lost because, well, we died out. I mean, there are multiple different tribes that are no longer in existence that were here just 150 years ago on the West Coast, for instance. So there's a lot of lore that is missing, too. But look into the lore. Look into your local lore. Go to your local museums that have Native American masks. Go to any exhibit that you can. Talk to any elder on the side that you can. Any native that's willing to answer a question for you, sit down, listen, talk to them, learn as much as you can, and talk to the local universities. Your folklore departments at your local university has repositories of folk-based research papers. They're usually, you've got to go and sit in the reading room to read them, and you're not allowed to remove the material. In some universities, they allow you to make copies, or they will provide you with a copy for a minimal cost. I have a couple of my folklore papers actually in a repository over here at the University of Oregon. And if I want a copy now, because I had to submit my original, I have to go and pay for a copy. And it's like 15 bucks. Some are less, some are only a few dollars, some are just the cost of the printing up, Xeroxing. It all depends on the repository's guidelines. So look into your folklore repositories at your local universities. They will have PhD student and PhD level professor material in there. You'll have independent research papers. You will have master's theses cataloged in some of them. So you're going to have access to a lot of good information that isn't formally published to the public, but it could be incredibly detailed and be very useful. So keep that sort of thing in mind. So remember, folklore document rooms. Anyhow, hopefully this has been thankful. Hopefully this has been a good show for you guys. And I'm thankful that we haven't had too many problems with connections. It depends on the day up here. Sometimes I have really good connection and sometimes I don't. Let me go back up, read back through this after I joined. Yeah, we all got booted, didn't we? That must have been a bigger issue than just me. And my connection must have been a YouTube thing. Although, we're hitting a flare zone with just been natural disruption due to our environment, too. Oh, wow. Thank you for some of these comments. These are really good. And something else I'm thinking about doing is I want to do... how to explain it? So I want to do casting boxes, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I want to show how you can make some casts with methods that you may not be aware of. And I've got to go through and check some of my thoughts. So I have found over the years some really nice prints in hillsides that were clay, or in loam patches coming down a hill where you've got a really clearly defined print, but it's all loam, or it's at such an angle you cannot cast it. I've come up with a couple of ideas of how to remedy that, being able to cast a print on a very peculiar angle. So I want to do some test boxes where I make an imprint in particular loam type or ground types, try my methods, see if it will work the way I hope it will, because I haven't tested it. It's just been something I've been rattling around with. And if I can get the method to come out right and actually do what I want it to do, I'll do a live and show you the casting method for doing something on a bizarre slope. And like I said, I got to mess around with it first, make sure it works the way I think it will. But my brother and I have, we've both done casting. We've both done foundry casting, metallurgy casting, jewelry casting. I've done thousands of castings in sand or in plaster or, heavy poundage castings of 20 pounds or greater. And, really minuscule castings of just a gram or two of metal. Very fine work. So I've got a pretty good idea of methodology. It's just whether or not the way I want to do it is going to be stable enough in the ground in order to achieve the outcome I want. So once I get that worked out, we're probably going to have a setup live where I try to walk you through the process. And it'll just be in a box, and I'll just use my little devices to hopefully set the track in there so it can be cast completely. So it's basically an idea of using a set of barriers so that you have an isolation barrier at the bottom of the track and then a secondary layer and maybe a third layer barrier so that as you pour the track, yes, you're going to have a flood up of material and then another barrier and a flood up of material. So the back of the track is going to be really thick and wonky looking, but the front of the track should be able to retain all of the correct characteristics for study, regardless of how bulky the back is. That's the only problem, how bulky the back is going to be. It's going to take a lot of pouring material, a lot of casting material to do something like this, or I'm going to have to make more barrier layers at a thinner height. So that's part of what I've got to work out and then see whether or not the track will actually be stable to be pulled out once it's cast and it doesn't break into parts. So anyway, something I've been working on. We'll see if it works out the way I want. If so, I'll do a live on it and show you what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I'll tell you it don't work. And I'll show you the method that I used that didn't work so that you won't make the same mistake I tried. I had, okay, Auntie Erin, I had asked what a, what a made of sticks was before you think. Arrow Wasiju here. Actually, in the Native American perspective, when it comes to Wasiju structures, anything that's up in a tree basket, a baby holding area, a, a structure like a Wookiee structure, that's multiple kinds of rooms, they're all just a Wasiju. It's one term for the whole concept. Just means treehouse, basically. Hole in the sky treehouse. You know, platform for hunting. A Wasiju. Um, at least that's every native I've talked to. Because I'm like, okay, is there any other name for these things? No, it's just Wasiju. Okay, what's a Wasiju to you? Well, it means they live up a tree. A tree basket. Or a tree house. Or a tree stand, like a deer stand. Like, okay, so some of them are movable, some of them are permanent. It's just a Wasiju. All of that's considered a Wasiju. So there aren't any more distinct names other than any structure in the sky that up in a tree, that a Bigfoot goes into, or lives in, or inhabits. It's just called a Wasiju, a hole in the sky. Or a hollow is another way of saying it, a hollow in the sky. Can you make more than one cast of the same prints? No. Once the plaster is in the print, as soon as you pull it out, the print's destroyed uh, because you just lifted the ground with the plaster material. So no, you're not going to be able to get more than one cast out of a single print. You will have to find a trackway of several prints to get more than one cast. Uh, but you can up your chances of finding trackways if you look in appropriate places. Every animal has to drink, including us. So the best places to look for tracks for any animal, be it a raccoon, a bear, or a cryptid, is along water edges, stream edges, crossings, anywhere they cross across a wet spot, edges of marshlands, edges of lakes, edges of rivers, anywhere like that, you're going to find tracks. In the deep woods, you'll find loam tracks, you'll find leaf tracks, you'll find harder to cast tracks unless you are tracking during spring or fall when there is a lot of muddy ground. Then you'll find really nice, clean, clear impressions in the deep woods, but you might come across the issue where only the top layer has enough moisture in it to be soluble enough to take a print. The layer underneath it might still be very dry. So your track is going to look weird. It's going to have a lot of textural information in it, high relief information in it, a good clean print, but it's not going to be a very thick looking track. So that's the other reason why I wanted to show you what a pancake track is really like and why and how it occurs, because there are far too many people out there claiming that tracks like that are faked when they're not. It's just due to the strata that the track is made in. So they're disregarding a lot of really good evidence by thinking that it's a faked track when it potentially isn't, and probably isn't. In fact, I think there are probably fewer people running around in monkey suits out in the woods. I really don't think that that's part of an issue. To be honest, I don't think there's anybody running around out there with big carved dogman feet or Bigfoot feet made out of wood or anything else making tracks in the wood to fake it. I don't. If that happens, it's maybe 1%, and I really doubt that. Stuff at a distance, it's obvious. You got somebody in a hoodie, you got somebody in a zip up coat with a whatever on them, you got somebody with a pullover mask and gloves on, stuff like that. All comes out pretty obvious in any kind of filming. So you can disregard that sort of thing. And people running around in monkey suits, I really don't think that's a big issue. I think that sort of thing is thrown out there when maybe the information's too good. It's just easier to disregard it and claim that it's fake when it isn't fake and you just don't know how to digest the material you're looking at or how to explain it. You know, part of doing research is being able to defend your research, which means you have to explain why a pancake track, for instance, is flat and why it's so thick. It's not the track itself, it's not the weight of the animal. It is the ground receiving the print. Plain and simple. The strata underneath the track dictates how the track comes out. Thank you, Tina. I'm glad that you find my stuff of interest. Will I ever do field trips? Could we pay to attend your events or educational advice? I try not to take people into my research areas, but some of them are actually public places anyway. And I have been thinking of doing a get together in one of those locations. I've also been thinking about doing just some general get togethers. so that people here in the Northwest can meet each other and we can go out. And I'm also willing to go to other people's locations and show them what I might find there. Maybe help them define their own areas better for research. And no, I don't share the locations with anybody. I also advise if you're going into the deep woods and you have a good relationship with, whatever Sabe, Bigfoot, or whatnot you got there, be very careful about who you bring into your research areas and don't tell people where your locations are. There are a lot of people that are trying to pin down where all these things are. It would be better to understand what they are before we start exposing them to people that may not respect them. Just my opinion. But yeah, I would like to have some get-togethers. I'd like to be able to sit down and share information with people and talk about, you know, different methodology that could be used and some of the more intricate things that you might find or run across. Just haven't figured out how people might want to do that, you know. Field trip, that could be fun. It could be a lot of fun. But like I said, a lot of the places that I go to are pretty public. And then the ones that I don't bring people to are way deep out in the woods. And I don't bring anybody there because, well, that's my lore areas where I was taught lore. So it's just not, we don't, we don't share that information because we don't want them bothered. It's a tribal thing. We consider them our ancestors. We consider them an ancient people. We consider them the people that taught us how to make fire, use tools, and make tools. So it's sort of trying to preserve your ancestor. You don't want them hurt, harmed, or misunderstood. And then, some areas are just too dangerous to go into. You don't want to take anybody there. Uh, Sometimes I don't want to go there. But to get pictures of some of these things or to get tracks of some of these things, I have to go there. Yeah, we've got all kinds of critters up here. We got crows and we've got great horned owls up here too. I got a raven that comes through, a couple of peregrine that fly over. There's actually a lot of birds up here. A bunch of stuff that comes into this yard too. Yeah, East Texas, Tina, has got a lot of native lore about it. If you can get back into, well, get into the Hopi and the Navajo lores, if you can get into Coronado's expedition into the area, it has a lot of information in his texts. You can look some of it up online. When the Spaniards were in that lower region of the United States, the southwestern region, and over to the Mississippi, the Spain still has a lot of records of cryptids and bizarre things that military men ran into and that people at forts ran into and that, and by the way, the Spanish star forts, they're all over the Southwest and into the Midwest. So all those star forts are actually Spanish built. And they were from the time of the conquistadors. Because they've been here since like the 1500s or before. Because I think the first interaction we had was like 1350 or something, or 1305. But, some of that history has been lost. So look into as many cultural documentations as you can of particular areas because the further you go back in history, even looking at gazettes, local newspapers from just 150 years ago, the local gazettes will have a lot of information about first-hand sightings of dogmen, of Bigfoot, of crawlers, of Wendigo, of all kinds of weird stuff. Pterosaurs, pterodactyls, dinosaurs in some cases. When you start looking through written material, the local gazettes from old newspapers, if you've got any still in your county repositories, are really good to research. Otherwise, go to your closest local college and go to their microfiche film room to look at old gazettes. Because if they aren't in a local repository, then they will be housed at a university in their microfiche department. You're going to have to do a lot of digging. You'll be sitting there for hours, but some of those old documents are incredibly interesting. Because they'll go into talking about, so and so and his daughter was walking down a path, and big hairy man tried to steal his daughter. The old guy fought him off with a cane, grabbed his daughter, and got back in the wagon and left. And they'll the description, and they'll go through, oh, there was a posse of men that got together to go track this thing down, and how many times it had been seen, and so down the road at such and such a farm shot at it the other night. So you'll have multiple articles about older sightings. So getting into those older documents, being able to look at them, sometimes you get some really good information. They give you lots of description. They tell you the size of the creature, where it was originally found, how many people saw it, what it acted like. Sometimes it'll give you the eye shine, what color its eyes were glowing at night, whether it was seen taking pigs away or hauling off cows or whatever it was doing. It's always going to be in those older newspaper articles and the local Gazette articles. Some of that stuff's really good. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I might have to start doing some of these a little earlier in the day, Leila. Maybe that would be better for you, and that would, maybe allow people who are in a different time zone a little better chance to get here and be able to share in these sorts of lives. Yeah, yeah, three flares coming at us. I've heard that. I watch the solar news, so to speak. I'm kind of interested in that sort of thing myself, Autumn. Yeah, I can believe that. Well, they've been, we've been going through a lot of rock and roll stuff up there in the sky. Like we have a pretty good uh, shooting star scenario going on over here in the Northwest for this last week. There hasn't been a night I've gone out where I haven't seen at least half a dozen shooting stars. And I know we've got fireballs incoming at the wrong angle. That's probably just, other things going on. Planetary pieces flying at us. Oh, thank you, Lila. I try to draw what I've seen so it makes it easier for other people to visualize the critters I've been around. Because I can't always take a picture. I don't always have time. Or, the lighting isn't correct. But I do like the fact that I can draw a lot of these creatures and accurately kind of show what they look like. I think that is far more helpful than just trying to describe them. The other thing is I'm pretty good at sitting down with people, and if you've had an encounter and you need a drawing done, I'm pretty good at drawing them from descriptions, because I'll sit there, I can draw them, and ask you, hey, does this look right? Is the nose right? Is that wrong? Is this right? I can erase, because I'll do those drawings in pencil. I can adjust, and I've done that for several people. Including a couple of friends who've had encounters, and I've always said that my drawings are pretty accurate as to what they've seen once we get done with it. And it usually takes me 20-30 minutes to sit with somebody and draw out what they describe. Yeah, I don't, thank you for that, LHV. Yeah, empaths are a good thing to have along with you. But I don't have a team. I don't do research. I'm actually just trying to document my grandmother's lore. It's just kind of a side thing that I'm doing with showing the different cryptids. My intention is to get the pictures of the cryptids and match it to my grandmother's lore so that there can be a traditional name in association with a particular cryptid so that further research can be done on the particular cryptid in each of my pictures. So I'm not really a researcher. Yeah, I've done the whole research thing. I was very serious about that back, well, 20, 30 years ago. But after making a bunch of plaster castings and having to throw away a bunch because nobody wanted to examine them, and trying to hand in hair samples and stuff like that that no lab wanted to process, uh, it just wasn't worth it to try to be a researcher. And besides, it really wasn't going to help me document my grandmother's lore when it comes to explaining what the different cryptids are, or matching them up to the lore that belong to them. So that's when I became more of a documentarist. Instead of trying to get the evidence that these things exist, I figured just go take the pictures of them and match them up to the lore name and the tribes that know about them and the lore that is specific to each of the types of cryptids that are out there that I'm aware of. I figured that would be a better thing, because then I can build a reference manual, kind of like a lexicon of their language. I can build a reference manual of pictures and associated lore and give the different tribal names for that particular creature. That might be more beneficial in the long run than trying to do field research, because then there would be a potential reference guide or tracker manual. It isn't really a tracker manual, it's just, cryptid connected to the correct lore and the correct name for the cryptid, which might be very useful for researchers in the future. You're very right on that, Angie. Ignorance is bliss for some people. Uh, XM crows seem to have some Morse code, so to speak, they use. I like to figure it out more. Like cause means something, I think, and so on. Well, I can give you one clue on that one, XM. That is a territory call for a crow. If you want them to come down close, do a territory call. They'll come down and investigate you. And I learned that from a friend of mine who used to encourage crows to come down to her by making a territory call at them. So you have to observe that or read behavioral manuals, animal behavioral manuals, like the type that you get for college when you're doing biological research. You'll get a overall manual of animal behavior that covers like everything on the planet just about. And you can read through those manuals. You can specifically look up crow or raven or whatever and figure out what its feeding behavior is, what its call sounds are like. You can also go to your biology department because they also retain a lot of animal calls and things like that in recordings. Part of their teaching materials, reference materials for biology students. I always use my universities as much as I can because there's a lot of information in repositories in universities. You just have to know where to look. My friend is banned by Navajo. They think she is a shapeshifter. Why, I wonder, do they think that? Um, Someone was able to give my GoFundMe a money donation this last week or so. So I'm not sure, maybe it's up and functional again. That might be a possibility. I've been working so many hours recently, though. I've had to actually take the last 2 weekends off because I was getting too dang tired, too wore out, and my arthritis was getting to me to such a degree I couldn't use my hand this last week, hardly. Ah, so I took the last 2 weekends off because I've been working 7 days a week. And still trying to work on getting my transmission fixed. I'm getting some other work done. I've got to put some heat sinks in my engine. And then I've got to deal with new tires on it. Those are going to be too expensive. And then I can go back to saving for my transmission fix, upgrade, replacement, something with a warranty on it. Hollis, I seen a guy on the American News, Newsmax, News Nation over the past 2 weeks. He has a deceased 300-pound, 8-foot Bigfoot. He splayed it, found it in New York. That's an awfully dried out Bigfoot, if that's the case. Because an 8-foot Bigfoot is roughly 900 pounds. I weighed Jen once. I talked her into getting on our scale. So our ranch had a pulley scale used in slaughterhouses that could weigh a ton, if I remember right, 2,000 pounds. I got her to get on the chain. I told her I wanted to play swing on the chain. And I got her one of the days that my parents were not home and my grandmother had gone into town to go do some grocery shopping. I was left alone for an hour or so. And my little scheming butt got Jen out of the woods into our grinding room and on a chain with a potential to weigh her. She realized I was messing with her, but I'd already gotten the weight. She was 900 and somewhere between 957 and 953 pounds. And she was roughly 8.5 feet tall at that time. 8 to 8.5. So, anybody that tells you got an 8-foot tall being that's 300 pounds, it's either very dried out or incredibly skinny. Sorry. But, you can find decomposed dead bodies in the wild if they've been turned out, turned away, not turned out on a rite of passage, but if they have been vanished from their community, there's nobody out to bury them. Nobody will bury them. In that case, if there's been a banished individual that has done something illegal inside the community, molested a child, beaten a woman, molested a man, any of that will get a cryptid banished out of their community, meaning nobody will help them, nobody will trade with them. They either have to become a member of another, have to hook up with another individual that's been banned, or they die alone. If they die alone, there's nobody there to bury them. If that's the case, you will find a body. It will be decomposed, it will be dried up, it will be mummified, depending on the region or area it's in. And yeah, those won't weigh very much because they've also been predated on half the time, or they've been worm-eaten. Again, predated on. So I haven't seen that particular thing But I'll look for it now that you said that, because that would be interesting to see what kind of hair mass it is, what kind of thing it might be. Okay, Hollis 47% human mixed with Neanderthal, a Native American. Well, that kind of explains that they are part of our family tree then, doesn't it, Hollis? That's interesting. Also connects them to archaic humans, which I'm pretty sure they're just another branch of the archaic human family. I think most cryptids are. I hate to say it, this cave-dwelling skin crawler, or not skin crawler, skinwalker, this cave-dwelling thing, you know, the creepy thing I came across. This might just be a cave-dwelling archaic human primate that never left the cave. You know, it just never evolved. Didn't need to. We won't know until we catch one and get some DNA from it. But the body shape of it, some of them can't stand, some of them can. Some can supposedly run really quick, but some of them supposedly can't. Their limbs are too deformed. I don't know. I didn't see this guy stand up. I only saw him crawl. Everything that he did seemed to be on the ground. But until we catch one or we get a sample of its DNA, we aren't going to know what it is. We won't be able to do much about it until we know what it is. But if it turns out to be a human or an archaic human, then what? You know, where's the moral line there? Because they've always been here. They've been here longer than modern man. Do we have the right at that point to say exterminate them if they're an older species than us? Or do we just, warn each other to stay out of these caves or teach each other what the behaviors are of these things and make sure that we have secure locations where we're aware of what's there? To me, that makes more sense than trying to exterminate them or not study them. Just make each other aware of them and take precautions. They're avoidable. In most cases, they're avoidable. We just have to figure it out. I mean, Native Americans lived alongside of these things for thousands of years. We didn't all die from interacting with them. And I don't mean just crawlers, but all of the cryptids. We've coexisted alongside of these things probably for millions of years and don't even realize it. One set big haul off full-grown moose. That's 1,600 pounds. Yeah, that's a big critter that can haul something that big off. Because moose weigh half a ton. They weigh 1,000 pounds. They weigh the same as a horse or more. Like you get the big moose up in Alaska, you're looking at 1,800 pounds for some of those things. They're almost a full ton. Yeah. Selling refrigerators to the Eskimos in order to give them a meat that you can actually eat. See, because if you put your meat out in the wild, it freezes so solid you can't defrost it. But if you throw it in a freezer, it's less frozen than what's naturally occurring outside your house. So it makes it easier to thaw your meat out to actually eat it. Yeah, you're welcome, Lila. I'm glad to give you some information like this. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you. And I don't I don't really care what people think about me. Um, that's not important to me. What's important to me is that lore is shared and that we end up with a better understanding of cryptids. Yeah, it's a skinny Sasquatch for sure. Well, I appreciate that. Oh, 250,000 people saw it in New York State Fair. Oh, wow. Deceased large patch. Poison oak. Taxonomy done on it. Semi-contacts checked. Oh, wow. Okay, I will definitely have to look that up, Hollis. Thank you for letting me know about that. I hadn't seen any releases on it, but then I'm kind of a hole in the wall when it comes to finding stuff. I'm out doing on my own thing. Yeah, I was trying to get my GoFundMe originally up to travel when I discovered that I had a bad transmission, so now it has to be focused on the transmission. I could probably, if I can get back into my GoFundMe, I can probably update the page, and that might help it reactivate correctly. But I haven't been able to get into it on my phone after I had problems with my YouTube channel. So I'm not quite sure, like I can't send thank yous through my GoFundMe anymore. So I'm not quite sure what the heck happened to my phone that caused the issues of getting back into my pages. Yeah, some Wendigo, well, almost all Wendigo are considered the Walking Dead. The only thing is they may not necessarily be the Walking Dead. They might just be pale creatures. They may not be spiritual beings. They might be some sort of a physical being. That's the only thing I'm thinking here. Yes, you can look at all the lore. And yes, you can look at the fact that they're considered a spiritual creature, that they are um, a deceased individual that comes back, that they are a possessed person that rots. There are many different cultural ways of looking at it, but if they leave a track and they have the ability to bite you, then it is unlikely that they are a ghost. It's more likely that they're something. And I'm always for the physical end of something before I am concerning myself with the spiritual end of it. Because in all of the times that I've been out and about, in all the different locations that I've been in up and down the West Coast, majority of this stuff isn't spiritual. It can walk up and thump you. So they're physical beings. It's just they're physical beings that we haven't documented yet. So what is lorically known may not be precisely the same as what's physically there, what's physically out there. You know, lore stories, though they are good history, they didn't, Native Americans didn't have the luxury of modern science. We had sight, interaction, behavior, what we could track, what we couldn't track. If you can't track something enough to understand its behavior, you're going to think it's a spiritual creature. Because natives are really good at tracking. Uh, and or if the thing is too scary that you're tracking and you don't want to be around it, or it has a venomous bite, or it takes a multitude of you to take the thing down, it becomes dangerous to try to figure out what it is. So it's easier just to ascribe the behaviors at a distance. It acts like this, it does this, it repeatedly does yada yada, therefore it must be such and such a thing. So that, there's also that dynamic to take into consideration, and that goes unilaterally for all lore. Doesn't matter if it's from the United States, from Native American lore, European lore, indigenous lore of Australia. There is going to be a mix between the supernatural and the physical because there still is until science proves it one way or another. Even today, many people think Bigfoot are supernatural when they may in fact be just a physical creature. Until we have proofs, that argument's going to continue. Okay, I was told they are walking dead because they are dead to the tribe. Well, dead to the tribe doesn't mean they're walking dead to, per se. It's a form of banishment. You don't talk to the person, you don't interact with the person because they're considered outside the community in some way. Oh yeah, and there is actually some lore that my grandmother told me. There are tribal people of Sasquatch out there that actually hunt crawlers and kill them and turn their skins into bags. The Appalachian Mountains, the Ozark Mountains supposedly have a type of cryptid that will go into the caves after these things. There's also some lore, or was some lore here from the West Coast that suggests it's the same sort of thing. A lot of that lore, though, is gone now. It's died out with the people that originally had it, or originally kept it. So if you do get any, like, information, it's going to be more modern. It'll be more leftover tidbits of lore instead of complete lore, or you're going to have something on a trail camera that makes you go, what the heck am I looking at? That will suggest that, you know, some cryptids will predate on other cryptids. Okay, the Sasquatch kid said the dad wants to come over out at night and they will eat whoever. But many Sasquatch people want to live in peace with little people. Oh yeah, those guys, Pukwudgie, and a bunch of other little things like that. They can be a pain in the butt. Oh cool, yeah, I'll look that up on them. Thank you. Oh yeah, spider bite, the invisible, like the Weeby Law. I have a picture of one of those things sitting next to Medicine Man Bigfoot. The camera, a standard camera, actually has the ability to take pictures of ghosts. That was something that's been known historically for a very long time. The old box cameras, because of their long exposure time, actually had even a better chance of taking pictures of ghosts than a modern camera does. But a camera in and of itself can take pictures of ghosts, which is technically taking a picture of the invisible. I think that's why phased Bigfoot, that sort of thing, you can get pictures of because the camera can already just pick it up. It's just knowing where to point your camera, figuring out where they're sitting, figuring out what they were doing in order to line it up and get a good enough picture for, or a long enough time exposure for the image to come through. When I was filming with my dog and she would be obviously trying to interact with something that I couldn't initially see, I would put my camera while recording and keep it there on her and whatever bush she was pointing at for a couple of seconds, 20, 30, to see if my camera lens could pick anything up. 9 times out of 10 it did. So that's part of how I got some like invisible phase pictures, cloaked pictures of Bigfoot. I just let the camera have enough time to residually pick that image up. And I did some experiments, um, messing with shutter speed, that sort of thing on cameras to figure out how to trick the camera to get the camera to do what I want it to do. And I did a lot of that by trying to photograph dancers or trying to video dancers or people at sports event in full motion and adjust, what can you do in the bare moment? Which direction do you need your shutter speed to be? Which direction do you need your light diopters to be? How closed down, how open up? How much light are you taking in as to how quick are you, And you can do that with some digital cameras. Not all of them, but some. And it actually, messing with those settings actually makes a huge difference. You can get some really interesting stuff. But you have to mess around with your camera and you have to figure out what its limits are, what its abilities and limits are. Yeah, and I could believe that would be where the Predator movie got its ideas from. I know the fellow that made that suit, and he got the mouth from a pit bull. How it opens up and has all that extra material. Ah, yeah, the cloud people. Puck wedgies, we need to do a topic in the future. Yeah, I've done some regional map stuff with puck wedgies, but I should probably do a whole live on like at least the northwestern area. Maybe I can do it tribally. All the different little people from all over the United States. Because my grandmother talked about a whole bunch of different stuff. It'd probably take several shows to cover them all. But doing some breakdowns of like the little people and the different types of them, which ones are dangerous, which ones are friendly, which ones you should stay away from, like the Stick Indians, the Wiwila, the Moon-Eyed people, the Pukwudgie, the Memagwese, just go through as many of those variations of little people so that y'all get a better understanding of how different some of these things are and some of the different abilities that they have. Because Pukwudgie can turn into lightning balls, like orb lightning. They turn into orbs, they turn into light balls, they turn into, lightning balls too, according to lore. So I think some of the people that think they are interacting with Bigfoot that are turning into orbs, they might have Bigfoot in their research areas, but they might also have Pukwudgie in their areas and be completely unaware that the Pukwudgie is the one that turns into light orbs and balls, not Bigfoot. There isn't any lore that I'm aware of that a Bigfoot turns into a light ball. There are fairies that turn into light balls. There are Pukwudgies that turn into light balls or orbs. I think there's another couple little critters too that can turn into light orbs or balls. So maybe I should do a piece on all the different little creatures that can turn into orbs. That might be helpful. Something like that. Yep, there are a ton of different kinds of little people. And then when you're getting into the cloud people, you've got variations of stories on that too. Because you've got star people, you've got cloud people, you've got the ant people, And ant people can either be up in the sky or they can be down in the ground. And they can either be small and look like grays, or they can be large and have a central horn with antennas, like the one I took a picture of. They're the ones that my grandmother called ant people. Um, but she didn't call cloud people and star people ant people. She made a differentiation there. She said that the cloud people weren't necessarily good, though some tribes have a good relationship with them. Other tribes didn't. So maybe kind of outlining some of that stuff would be useful for people as well who are doing research, so they can have a little more information to draw on. And that, when you're getting into that end of stuff, you're also getting into grasshopper people and mantis people, and you start getting into the other insectoids, and there are also a bunch of different reptile creatures. We even have a kind of a reptile creature here in the, well, a couple of different kinds of reptile creatures here in the Northwest. One is like a large tree salamander of some sort that looks very much like an iguana in some respects. And then we've also got one that supposedly builds pit traps for humans that's much larger. The tree iguana type thing is about 5 foot. The other one's scraping 7, 8 feet. One that likes to build pits to grab humans in. So covering some of that more bizarre history and lore might also be beneficial. And then also breaking down more of the other concepts. Because there are a ton of different kinds of cryptids and creatures throughout native lore that are only localized to one tribe. So you have to find those, figure those out. And they don't repeat. So some of this stuff is very localized lore too, and it's not shared culturally. At least not across the United States. It might be shared in a region, but not elsewhere. Yeah, I'll do what I can, and I want to do far more research and get into more than just what I'm aware of, firsthand wise. My primary focus is on the stuff that I'm aware of, that I've already interacted with, and that I've been taught about. But also just going through and trying to break down and show what some of these things look like and the behaviors that they have historically throughout lore. You know, the things that have been recorded about them. Do they have poison glands? What color their eye shine is, if it's been recorded. What their behaviors are like. You know, all of that would be really beneficial if it could be, you know, chunked down into one resource or a conversation about them. Easier to access the material and make it more digestible for people. You know, instead of having to do research on each different kind of thing, maybe just having it outlined in a way that's easier for people just to kind of pick it up and assimilate the information and you understand it relatively quickly. Yep, that is very true. We have to know what we are seeing and experiencing to protect ourselves in nature. That is very true. What a monster type Bigfoot. Yeah, right? Hollows. Have you ever seen Peter from Petrified Dog Training on YouTube? He is a half monster type Bigfoot. Is dead. Acquired 1953. Hunting a spell. Tracking can I tribe in the swamps. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll look that up too. Some of the eye in the cloud even have reflective glint in the eye while they are 100% real eyes. Yep. Yep. Hollows. They are from a dwarf size to 22 feet. You would have to look through Yep. And then there are also a ton of different things the further north you get. Uh, Things up north get bigger. It's because there's more isolated areas. There's a lot of deep crevasses and stuff further north. Without the interactions, it's safer for larger creatures to stay hidden in deeper terrain. Even here in the northwest, there are some really big creatures in some areas that aren't that far away from humanity, but they're in inaccessible areas. There are no roadways that go in there. There's no logging done in those regions because it's, 50-degree angles, not a nice 45, it's 55, 60 degrees, 65 degree. You're looking at, climbing a cliffside to get to some of these regions. And in those areas, there's some really weird stuff that can move trees as they're walking through them. Like you can sit, I know of one area up in one of these pass regions here in Oregon where I can sit above and look down into a massive ravine, and there is something in the bottom of that ravine that is large enough that as it moves through, it sways massive trees up to 6 feet. Like they're just kind of moving them out of their way as they're passing through. Every once in a while, you'll see the top of something's head. But I haven't ever been there with a pair of binoculars. I really need to sit there with a binocular set and enough time and a long distance telephoto lens, see if I can get a picture of what moves the trees in that particular ravine. And there are a lot of bizarre sounds come out of that ravine that don't even sound like Bigfoot. I don't know what they are, but whatever makes sounds in that particular ravine has got a huge set of lungs on it. Because it will make a continuous sound for 45 seconds to 2 minutes. So whatever it is huge. Oh, okay. Cool, Andy. Yeah, definitely have her reach out to me. Yeah, I'm perfectly open to talking about this stuff. And I don't get into the infighting he said, she said malarkey within the community. There's no point in that sort of thing. It doesn't help any of us understand the topic any better to infight with each other. I don't care about that. I do care about the lore, and I do care about having a good understanding of what's out there cryptid-wise, at least from a lore perspective. Oh wow, you're in Metro Atlanta. And Dogman and Bigfoot coming. Yeah, well, we've got them come through towns up here too. The size of the city don't matter. When I was in London for a couple of days, I still found stick clips in the middle of the city of London. Out on the sidewalks and in the little forested areas, which are just every other block or so. There's a little square that's got a mini forest in it, and not much else. But yeah, they're even in big cities, in old cities. I've seen the same behavior on the ground. Same glyphs, same stuff, man. So I think we have just gotten so used to these things being around us, we don't even think about it. Aha. Cheryl, my daughter saw a not deer on top of Sandy Ann Pass. Well, that There's lore about that. Okay, question. Spider bite. The walking trees. Are they moving on their own? There is old European lore about what's called ettins that are walking trees. I haven't ever seen one, but there is lore about them, so it's possible. Okay, Valentine, it might be interesting to describe tools you could identify these tribes from darts, arrows, and so forth. Uh, most of what I've gotten for trades on tools are stone tools. In the entirety of my life, I've run across 2 dogman spears down in the redwoods. One had been broken in half, the other one was laying. My mother would not let me take either of them. She would not let me bring them home. But she did let me collect the head from the one that was broken. And she said, well, that's because that fighter lost the fight. Or whatever, so I could take that one. The cryptids that use atlatls. It's really hard to find their arrows. You can find the atlatl, but they keep their arrows somewhere. I don't know where. Up a tree, maybe. They keep them closer to themselves than you find them on the ground. And they have the ones that I have found on the ground have been very simply marked. Um, the atlatl that the Skookum people were using, I did find 2 arrows, and they were both marked with just a single purple line of berry juice around the shaft, right next to where the flu was tied on. So, without knowing exactly which person the intertribal marking belonged to, it would be really hard to talk about any specifics other than they mark their tools the same way that natives did. It's about as far as I can get with that. Unless there's some sort of, like, major markings. Like if you were, like when I was face to face with the Memegwese and his medicine pouch had markings on it. I could tell which medicine group he belonged to from the markings. Um, Patty, if her parfledge was facing the camera and you could see the markings on it, it would tell you which medicine group she really belonged to, definitely, or what tribe she learned her medicine from. So that sort of thing, though, is very entertaining and interesting to think about. It becomes more difficult to place exactly because we don't have any living record of their markings in association with their tribes unless you're interacting with them directly and they tell you what the markings mean. Otherwise, you have to make assumptions based on Native American tribal markings for such items and whether or not their devices, their things, have the same markings on them. Quite oftentimes they do, but sometimes they don't. I could go over how Native Americans mark their stuff, just to give some familiarity as to what you might run into out in the wilds. But I do like that idea. And as I dig through my storage unit this fall, I will be able to dig out a bunch of different stone tools that I've collected and traded for. I probably got 15 or 20 of them, maybe, that I could probably walk you through. Anything from knives to skinners to bark scrapers. Oh crap. I gotta go back to a location I just remembered I forgot a stone axe behind. Well, I got a trip to do next weekend. Dang it. Sorry. I'd been out, I'd set the axe where I'd close to where I found it, see if they'd take it again or not. Then I forgot to grab it on my way out. Well, I'll have to go grab it. If it's still there. If it is, I'll show it to you. It has a nice edge, but it had been broken. So I think they had just left the tool off to the side because it had been broken and they weren't going to resharpen it. That's why I felt it was okay to grab it. Yikes. Hey, that sounds horrific. I wouldn't want to be around Wendigo screaming. Ben Ray, Shaman mentioned you a little while ago. Still wants to interview you too. He was a little caught up with some personal growth, slowing him down. Yeah, no worries, Spider-Bite. Yeah, just get a hold of me in my comments and give me your guys' information and I can use my email to contact you. Because I check all of my messages, all of my comments. Yeah, the walking trees are definitely known in Europe. I don't know if there is native lore about walking trees. I don't remember any native lore about walking trees. But I know there's lots of European lore about different kinds of walking trees. And there are actually a couple of different types, according to European lore. Oh wow, that's really cool. Hollis. In Australia we have an owl called the Screaming Woman. Apparently it sounds terrifying. Mm-hmm. My grandmother talked about the Yoo-hoo, or Yahoo, which is in Australia, and I think they're in the Appalachians, if I remember right. But they're not a living creature anymore, according to her way of talking about them. So they were supposedly a really archaic cryptid with red hair all over their bodies. They had the entire village of them had been killed off in ancient times, and the result is that they are a shape-shifting ghost, is kind of how my grandmother put it. So you can see them either as a Bigfoot, which is very rare. You most commonly hear them making their Yoo-hoo call, Yahoo call. They're actually called, they're named a Yahoo because of the call that they make. But they turn into a dark entity, like a shadow being. Because they aren't a physical being anymore. Their culture were all turned into ghosts because of the things that they were doing. At least that's some of the lore about them. I'm going to try to do some more research, see if I can find more information on the Yahoo other than what my grandmother told me about. See if I can get a better handle on what other stories might be out there about them. And before I go into a lot of depth about those particular beings, because I don't want to mislead people. I'm more interested in just sharing information and trying to bring some questions up or bring some thought up that may not be the norm or the average of what people think. Get the thought process going. Okay, Hollis. Yeah, please, Valentine, always ask questions. I will give my opinion if I have one. If I don't know about something, I won't blow any smoke up your I will just tell you I don't know. And if I have an answer of any kind, I will definitely try to do what I can to answer a question. Okay, Hollows, I've heard interviewers say recently that if most people knew what was outside, they might stop going out, sitting on a porch. Oh yeah, believe me, I'm aware of that. Spider bite is because we do see them, or don't see them, that they don't touch, hurt us. I I don't think they really have a boundary that way. Some of these things might just watch you, observe you, pay attention to you, just like any other animal being curious about another animal. And if they're not hungry, you don't get eaten. But they might also be checking you out for dinner later, because there's always that possibility. Like the crawler during the day was definitely checking me out for dinner later. And because I was camped alone and off to the side in one of the back bubbles of the campground, I was easy game. I was real close to where it naturally came through its cross-through area. There was plenty of cover for it to get to my campsite, because my campsite was fairly close to the brush line, and it was in a recessed area where I couldn't be seen very readily from any other direction until there were more people in the campground. So some of their behavior might be advantageous. You know, they aren't going to attack this day because there are too many eyes on you, or there's too much going on that keeps you technically safe from them. But as soon as the sun goes down, or as soon as the other people are out of the area, you might just go missing. And the same can be said for cougar. Cougar like to side and back attack you. They don't like coming at you straight forward. If they're coming at you straight forward, it's because they're eating dinner, or they've got kits with them. They got babies with them. So they will come at you to protect the young or to scare you away from their dinner. But if they're going to take you down for dinner, they're coming at you from the side or from behind. And in that kind of a case, you can be there 1 second and be gone the next. Because if you're small enough, they'll just pick you up and walk off with you. And some of the cougar up here in this state are far larger than you might think. Most cougar are 8-10 feet long. But there have been sightings in this state for years of cougar that are 12-15 feet from nose to tail. If you're getting a hold of something that big that's on your rear end, you could be a teenager and probably get drug off by it, and nobody would ever know. Because the first thing they do is they break your neck. Snap. And then they'd haul you away. And they'll put you up in a tree. Or drop you up in a crag. So some of the disappearances could be cryptids acting in the same manner, ambush attacking, and hiding dinner off somewhere else. Or you're dealing with a predator like a cougar that has the same behavior. You know, the behavior stays consistent. It's one of the characteristics of things that have survived the longest on this planet. After asteroid hits, after major disasters, after planetoid disasters, the things that have survived the highest survival rate are things that are omnivorous, or ambush predators, or completely carnivorous, and or have the ability to shift their feeding behavior. So if they were omnivorous, they go to carnivorous if there are no plants left, for instance. And then it's anybody eats anybody. So you also have to think about the history. You know, why some of these things have survived is probably because they've never had to adapt. Or there's always been a food supply that they're willing to eat, or they have a behavior in their way of hunting that has kept them from being hurt. You know, anytime you get hurt in the wild, if you're alone, there is nobody to bandage your wound. There is nobody there to set your leg. There is nobody there to haul you out. If you hurt yourself and you get an infection, there's no way to treat it unless you know how to treat it yourself. So it's dangerous to be hurt in the wild. So any predator that has learned that will hunt from behind. It reduces their risk of being hurt in the process of taking down dinner. It prolongs their life uh, not to be damaged. You know, it keeps them healthier longer. Let me see what my battery level's at. Oh, I'm still doing pretty good. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting at 2.5 hours. Well, I don't know. You guys tired of hearing me talk? Seriously, okay. Okay, thank you for the live getting near to Lilith. Good night. Don't have okay. Yeah, good night. Take care, Lee. Spider Bite the Shaman. Benton said. Oh, okay, I read that one. Good night, Lay. Alright, guys. Looks like. Yeah, no kidding. Good that you guys survived that sort of thing. All the wild and dangerous animals in America. Why are Americans scared of Australia? I know, right, Spider Bite? We got nothing like that with big teeth. Besides Crocs. And they are only up north. Yeah, and we've got all over Florida, we got gators. People down there will just pry a gator's mouth open to get their dog out. Or, yeah, no, we've got a lot of bizarre things here that we live next to. I think people are terrified of Australia because of all of the venomous stuff. Except we have a ton of venomous stuff here too in the Americas. We just don't realize it or think of it. Like, we got little caterpillars and stuff that are incredibly dangerous. We got little tiny crystal clear colored scorpions that are only a half-inch long right here in the Northwest that are deadliest. Got the deadliest venom for a scorpion in the world. Little tiny thing right here in Oregon. And then we got rattlesnakes and coral snakes down in California because, you know, people let them go when they lived. We got a lot of stuff all over the world that survives here, let alone our own stuff that survives here. Shrews. Don't pick a shrew up. A shrew can bite you and it kills you. It's got a neurotoxin and it's two little black teeth in front. Yeah, top of the food chain. All right. Completely hear that one, Autumn. Oh, Zenkin, oh dear, good to see you. Just joined. My question, do they go to war with the dogmen? Depends on the cryptid. Most of the dogmen up here and most of the Bigfoot up here have copacetic relationships. In fact, a lot of dogmen guard families of Bigfoot up here. But it may not be the same in other areas. Other areas, there might be conflicts between two different kinds of species groups. It just depends on what the history is of the particular area. And that's the other thing, you know, we're, as researchers, as people interested in the topic of cryptids, we are constantly looking from the outside in. It doesn't matter if we're looking through lore or if we're looking at it through research. We are trying to figure out a puzzle that we don't have any first-hand knowledge of or have very little first-hand knowledge of. That being said, we're always going to be on the outside of that puzzle until we either have some sort of working relationship with these things where we can communicate and learn from them, or we've figured out enough about them we can make up our minds about certain things. But then you're going to have to study their culture, their societies, their history, and you can't do that without being inside their culture somehow. That's going to be the tougher one, tougher than just proofing them. You know, proving that they exist can be done with just straight up DNA. Um, enough samples that confirm enough times that they're related to us or related to a Neanderthal or related to something that we already have in our records, the more likely science is going to go, okay, well, they do exist. We just don't have a living example of them. Yeah, and how are you going to do that? You know, get a living example or get into their culture. It's like guerrilla studies on a whole new level of danger because we don't know the behaviors. We don't know what sets them off. We know you can't look a gorilla in the face. They'll thump you for that. I know you can't look a fierce man in the face. They'll thump you for that. But I can look a regular Bigfoot, an Oma, a Guanch, a Yeren, a Skakkum. All those people I can look in the face and they'll just have a conversation with you. Or they'll look at you and go, But looking in the face of a Gugwait, they'll growl at you. Looking in the face of a fierce man, they'll throw you off a cliff. Boogers, they don't like being looked at. Janoskwa, they'll attack you. You know, it's behavior. It's behavior that we are unfamiliar with, that we don't know. So that's where it gets really dangerous. You want to sit, for instance, to compare. Would you rather sit down next to a gorilla or a baboon? If you know nothing about either one, which one do you think you would survive the longest next to? A baboon or a gorilla? Either way, you're putting your life in their hands, not yours. There is nothing you can do against a baboon or a gorilla, a chimpanzee, or any greater ape when it decides to attack you. You're going to be on the losing end of that. Simple fact. Yep, cats will eat squirrels whole. They'll eat a lot of stuff whole. Mosquitoes, no kidding. Nope, make it 3 hours. Yeah, no kidding, I guess so, huh? Florida's like Australia. The creature, yeah, true. Autumn, a dogman, wild, unpredictable creature. Correct. And some of them have a nastier personality than others. The brown ones here, they'll look at you, they'll give you a flying bird sign. The 7-foot tall Amarok type dogmen here, they'll come look at you, they'll be copacetic, they might get in your face, they will test your limits. Likely they're not going to hurt you. You get all the big guys, the Shilkaok, ones with the green eye shine, they'll growl at you. They'll get real close to you. They will definitely make you feel like you are lunch. And I don't trust them because I don't think I can. So just, the bigger the cryptid, the less likely you're going to get close to them, the less likely you're going to get much out of them, and the more likely they could just very easily hurt you without even thinking about it twice. However, with all of that being said, how many people have gone straight up missing while doing research? Not many. People do go missing. People go missing for unexplainable reasons. Doesn't always mean it's a cryptid involved. But there's just too many in the lore that practice cannibalism that make me uncomfortable because they don't give that up. Um, those are the ones, those are the species that I'd be more leery of. And that can't, that isn't always particular to the cryptid type. Sometimes that is a social structure thing. Sometimes cannibalism is not a survival behavior anymore, but a ceremonial behavior. Religious practice, potentially, or a cultural practice. Keeping the enemy at bay. You eat your enemy to show that you truly conquered them. There's that possibility too. And it looks like it's getting really dark in here. Oh, sorry about the glare, guys. Yeah, gorilla or neither. I'm with you on both of those. I'd rather sit next to a gorilla than a baboon, but at the same time, that'd be scary. Either way, I don't know if I could trust it. Gimme plant up north will be ongoing for life if it gets you. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, gorillas. Because you already know we can't just trust chimpanzees. Chimpanzees have got some of the worst behavior when they go bad. They really have bad behavior. A gorilla will bluff at you more than they will attack you. But once they get to a point where they attack you, you're pretty well done. And baboons, they're just so dang territorial, you can't trust them. Yep. Well, and chimpanzees have been some of the only apes out there that have created war on other groups and done it in a methodical way, where one troop kills the entire neighboring troop, or if a group tries to divide from the main group, it gets decimated for leaving. That's something that's kind of prevalent with chimpanzees. It isn't so prevalent in other monkey groups. Yeah, I blocked it. Go figure. And spider bite. An Australian surfer girl got lost. Lost an arm and a leg to a shark, so she went in a movie about it. Kennels, and they look like her. Bye. Yikes. Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't ever want to be eaten alive, because some creatures won't kill you before they eat you. Like bear won't kill you before they eat you. A cougar will. Ah, oh my goodness, this feels like it wants to pop, but it just won't do it. It's been that way all week. Well, I think I am going to probably either head out and have a cigarette or just end the show so that y'all can go do what you want to do. Um, hopefully this has had some, hopefully this has been a good talk, and hope you liked the information. And I'll do what I can next weekend or the weekend after. Just depends on how tired I am at the end of the week. Here in the next like month or so, I'm gonna be hitting a few 12-hour days, maybe longer. So it might be a little sparse for a minute on shows, but I'll try to keep stuff coming out. I'm glad you guys like the drawings. Oh, okay, it's still early for you guys. Awesome. Yeah, I think I'm going to wander out and have myself a cigarette if you guys want to come with me. Cool. Once people start dropping off the channel, If you got any more questions, hit me up right now. Because, oh, you're in San Francisco. Hey, you're on the West Coast just like me. You know, the San Francisco Bay Area's got some interesting lore around it, too. There have been, there are old stories of larger sharks in that area and flying cryptids that come into that area like greater eagles. In fact, I think the San Francisco Oakland Bay Area was where one. See, when I was a kid, back in the 70s, there was a kid picked up. He was trying to get home like dusk or a little after dusk. He got picked up by a flying creature. He thought it was a giant eagle. It carried him, I think, 15 or so feet before it dropped him. And he wasn't a small kid. I think he was about 130 pounds. So there's some old stories about stuff that lives in that Bay Area that might be worth researching. You know, the idea of the Thunderbird being there, giant eagle, giant fish. Oh, it's midnight where you are, Auntie. Oh, wow. You're back east then, eh? Because it's, what, 8 o'clock here, 9 o'clock, something like that. Alright, that works for me. I'm gonna grab a sip. Oh, and I'm gonna go pollute my lungs. Oh my goodness. I think I sat too long. My back is stiff. One of the biggest things is I wish people would do a little more like digging into native lore about some of these different things. And also when people do dig into native lore, if somebody gives you a name like Buckwus or Pugwudgie or whatever, and they're trying to make it relevant to Bigfoot, you know, say that they're such and such a creature, go look up the term, go look up the word, go look up the name, see if they've got it right. You know, make sure that what they're telling you isn't something fictitious. Like, buckwuss are only 4 foot tall, so a buckwuss can't be 8 feet tall if it's only 4 foot tall. Stuff like that. And try to dig for more than one resource. You know, dig online. Go find yourself some folklore books. Dig through them. Anytime you can go to oh wow, my battery just dropped really bad out here. Huh. Bizarre. Interesting. I must have been exposed to something else out here that I wasn't exposed to inside the house. That's bizarre. Because I just went from having like 45% to 30% in just seconds. Maybe there's some solar radiation going on in here. So yeah, try to always like research any name or anything that somebody tells you. Don't even take my word. Do your own research. Find out what these names that people are kicking around, what they really talk about, what they're really saying. Because unfortunately, we are human and we are tempted to make things fit, whether they fit or not, because of our own concepts. What we want something to be, not what something is. You kind of have to throw your own ego away and your own personal perspective away to accept what a thing is, instead of trying to paint it into a corner and make it what you want it to be. We watched Darwin do a lot of that. And we watched people around that time do a lot of that too. Uh, Before, things got hammered out and figured out. And anthropology and archaeology does that a lot too. They buried a lot of stuff because it doesn't fit what they want the perspective to be, what they believe the perspective is. So we're all aware of that sort of thing having gone on historically as well. Be aware that that has not stopped, and it is prevalent throughout every field on the planet, except maybe buildings. But then, you're just dealing with less graded material. But yeah, do your own research. Look into names, especially if somebody's giving you a name for something that's a native name or an indigenous term. Go look it up. If you have to, look it up by the word that they give you. Look it up in as many different cultures as you can. Does that apply to more than one culture? Does it apply to more than one tribe? Because once you start comparing some of these ancient descriptions of cryptids, you'll find that they're everywhere, and there's a lot of lore on both sides of the planet about different things. We just have different names for them in different regions. I'm so glad you like this one, Autumn. And I'm really kind of wondering what Cosmic ran across today and what he was able to find, because I know he was doing a beach expedition for Sasquatch today. That's why he wasn't here. And I know his area. It was one of my educational areas, so I'm very curious about what he's found. And one of his videos recently, there was a little uh, facial... Wow, I just turned blue. That's bizarre. And I did not touch the screen. Odd. So anyway, one of his videos recently had a little tiny stone that has a pair of petrified shell casings from tube worms in the little rock sandstone piece. Now that little sandstone piece is something that I had seen back in the 70s. It's the same little marker. So that cryptid is still carrying that around, and or a family member of the cryptid that I was shown as a child is still carrying around that particular marker. So some of these markers are inherited. Like a medicine man will leave a marker to a replacement medicine man. Same with a medicine woman. If their tools are not buried with them, then it goes to the next heir in line. And cryptids seem to hang on to those things a very, very long time. Thousands of years, in fact, in some cases. And they never let them go. So be aware that if you find a marker, don't take the marker. If you find a unique marker, leave it alone. It's better to track where the marker goes than it is to take it. And the reason is you can be assured that who or whatever carries that marker around consistently takes it with them. If you remove the marker from the environment, you no longer have a way of tracking that specific individual or group. You then have to find the new marker that they use, if they bother to replace it. Because sometimes they don't. Sometimes those markers are considered ancient medicine, and once they are lost, they're never replaced. So you just took something out of their environment and you have no clue about its importance or what its story is. It's better just to leave that stuff in place. Though it is very tempting. Believe me, I've been tempted. And I did take a marker once, and that's how I found out they don't replace them. And I'm still trying to figure out how to return that marker to that particular individual. I think I know where the original marker came from, so maybe I can go back to the point of origin. And hopefully I don't have to pay a price for returning it, because I took it, because that's technically thievery in their community. Because I didn't ask permission. And that can get me ostracized. That's the other thing. Part of the reason why I don't take people into my research areas is because there are long-term relationships with these creatures. And if I take somebody in some locations, if I take somebody in there and they do something that gets me ostracized, that gets me kicked out of the area, banished, I not only have to pay a fine, I may never be able to go back into those areas safely to research. I might not get any results, or I might get attacked. So that's why I'm really leery about bringing people into some of my research areas. Except for the ones that are more public. Then I don't care, because everybody walks through those areas. Everybody has a public right to be in those areas. And the relationship that I have with those creatures is nothing like some of the relationships I have with things deeper in the woods. Yeah, where my mom had taken me, that sort of thing. I don't want to take anybody to any place that my mother or my grandmother pointed out, because, well, that would be potentially detrimental to me. And I don't need that. Yeah, in fact, the hairy man, Hollis, is something I've wondered about. You know, the green man from Europe? The leaf that shows just his face through a bush line looks very human. They call them wild men. It's got to be cryptids. It's got to be a representation of a cryptid. I think there's a lot of that preserved throughout European sculpture. There's a lot of wild men, there's a lot of unusual creatures that are preserved in carvings in churches, for instance. Take a look at the lore. Okay, XM, yeah, somebody said something about we should be to be afraid to be on the porch if we knew what was out there earlier. Yeah, well, even this place has something that crawls over the roof. Last winter, I was out on the back porch. There's a clear siding that's used for a rain awning, and it was climbing over that rippled siding, and it was paler than me and didn't move right, and I immediately went inside, and then I hadn't heard the thing crawling on the roof till a couple nights ago, and I didn't get a chance to see it, but when I went out back to have a cigarette, it moved across the latticework, across the back porch, and onto the latticework like it was going to drop down. So I went to the front yard to smoke my cigarette, and I watched the roof line and listened to either side, because I know it can't get around the house on one side, but if it was smart enough, it could get around on the other end. Made it brief and came back inside. But it's such a rare occurrence, twice in 2 years, that I don't think it's a major danger to anybody living here. It's just an anomaly that goes over in the middle of the night. Keep your doors closed. Hopefully you don't figure out how to get in. And, you know, occasionally it will tap on the wall. Or something taps on the wall. Not sure what taps on the wall. Yep, solar activity is very heavy here right now, Hollis. And in fact, there's going to be, August 12th, there's going to be a solar eclipse, I think, that's visible here in the northwest. And here coming up in the next couple of days, there's going to be some sort of lunar barrage from all of the solar activity. That scientists would like, the public's help to record this stuff as it occurs. We won't have a view of it here in the Northwest. We're not in the visual zone. But everybody in the Midwest is going to be able to see the solar blasts hitting our moon. So that would be something to record. Okay, spider bite, that's weird maybe. Goes outside, I would pick up the Wi-Fi. Yeah, it might be a difficulty in picking up the Wi-Fi, but it's a charge on the phone. It shouldn't have anything to do with that. And when I did have my Wi-Fi misconnections, it was inside the building, not outside. And the kind of how the Smithsonian disappears every giant skeleton found in the North Americas. Oh yeah, there was a particular curator that didn't like the idea of giants because he thought they were biblical Nephilim. So he boxed up all of those parts and pieces and never let them get cataloged, and he kind of shoved them off in back rooms. He did that habitually for the entire 30 years that he was in charge of the Smithsonian. You can look him up. Just do some digging on who's been in charge of the Smithsonian and when stuff disappeared. It will become apparent which curators were there when the stuff went missing. They're likely the ones to blame for that. Yeah, I'm not sure why I went blue other than that the sun went down. I'm assuming it's a blue light issue and my camera can't adjust. Go figure. Uh-oh. How did you get a message rejected, Autumn? That doesn't make any sense. When Spider Bite would sincerely combined with tears help. Yeah, I'm not real sure. On that one, I didn't keep up with that conversation enough to know what's being said there. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, it's gotta be my phone. It's camera having an issue. I'm noticing that it's gotta be my phone settings. I'm gonna have to mess with my camera settings again and make sure that doesn't happen in the future. I was messing with the settings earlier to see if I could bring up different light perspectives. Ah, there we go. It's adjusted again. Well, yeah, I do have a violet blue aura. That's a good possibility right there. I have what's called an indigo aura. Sometimes my aura interferes with electronics, by the way. Like TVs. I can walk by a TV and it'll fuzz out on me. Same thing will happen to a radio around me. If I hold if I try to wear a battery operated watch, I'll drain the battery out of the watch in about 2-3 days. So it might just be my aura messing with stuff. Blue skin. Yeah, spider bite. Yeah, aura or other. Yeah, we've had a lot of shooting stars here. Grease the roof. We'll slip off. I wish it was that easy. I'd like to catch one of those things safely, but no. Tell the roofer before he goes up there. Yeah, no kidding. So far, the things only come at night, never during the day. I'm pretty sure that it won't ever come during the day. Okay, XM, you can hear those solar flares at night in the AM radio. Sometimes, yeah, I can believe that. They can pick up those lower oscillation frequencies that they put off. That would make total sense. Planetary alignments. Yeah, no kidding. Is that what they call rabbit? Cute. Alright, I was thinking, I remember you mentioned this Sunday Night Live and had to go to your channel on lives and click notify for the live earlier. No notification. Yeah. Every 3 months, YouTube goes through your notification list and turns stuff off. So go through your notification list about once a month, make sure everything's turned on correctly. Because I've been subscribed to, several channels for several years, and I constantly have to go back in and reset that I get all notifications because YouTube just knocks them out, turns them off. It's a real pain. Wish they wouldn't do that. I think they're trying to cycle you through so you get more exposure to other channels. Except, when you're interested in a topic, you want consistent information from particular channels. So I think it's kind of counterproductive that they do that. So be careful of that. Double check your notifications, make sure your bell's clicked, because sometimes they'll unclick it for you. Yeah, it's the AI's doing it too. It's really not cool. Okay, it only does the good stuff too for some reason. Yeah, I know. They like to pick on the channels, it seems, that have a good rapport with people. Go figure. It's a way of shutting down the ability to communicate about things. Well, anyhow, I think my battery is starting to croak. I am, yeah, sitting at like 1%. Alright, everybody, I think I'm going to head out. It's been a great conversation. It's been a great 3 hours. Hopefully, I will have enough information for another good setup next Sunday. Otherwise, I'll let you know. Depends on how tired I am. I will try to do every Sunday if I can. And if I can't, it's probably because I'm too tired. And I'll do it another weekend. And if something comes up like that, I'll, post a picture, let you guys know what's going on. Also, it cycles you to the bottom and puts other channels up randomly at the top of your list. Yep, I've noticed that too, Autumn. So yeah, just go back through, double check your notifications, double check that you're actually subscribed, because that's the other thing they'll do, is they'll unsubscribe you. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. Glad you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all. Hopefully I'll be able to do another show next Sunday. I'm probably going to get into more specifics again on stuff. I'll make maybe an announcement midweek, put up a picture, let you know what the topic's going to be. But it'll probably be either another regional map or more stuff about lore, just to try to fill in holes so that you have some more information about what's out there. Awesome. Yeah, and I've also discovered that drinking pomegranate juice will actually help you reset your body. It's something I used to do all the time when I was younger, and I've kind of fallen off from drinking my pomegranate juice. I think I'll bite the expense, though, and go back to doing so, because it will help your body regenerate pretty quickly. Anywho, thank you guys. Appreciate you all. Glad you were here. Great show. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you around the block. Take care, everyone.